Alaska and Corlin, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this debate. And I want to start by paying my compliments to the Taoiseach Micheál Martin for taking the lead on this, for doing the groundwork over a number of months to get us to this position. And of course, I want to recognise the role of the Taoiseach, Mr Ryan, and indeed many members in this House who have called for recognition for a long time. I believe it is an important moment. It is symbolic, but also practical. And it underlines our view that the Palestinians' right to have their own state is as valid and equal to that of the Israeli people. It means that the starting point for any internationally mediated talks should be that there is a fully fledged Palestinian state. That is not a Palestinian entity, not a form of a state, not a dependency, not a reservation or a Bantustan, but a fully fledged independent state. Negotiations, of course, will have to take place over borders, about the transition, about security guarantees for Israel and Palestine, which will be needed, about normalisation of relations between Israel and all of the other countries of the region, which is crucial, and also the fraught question of the future of refugees and the holy sites. I would like to take an opportunity to make a few points that I think are relevant. First of all, recognition of Palestine is not support for Hamas, nor recognition of Hamas in any way. The United States recognises Cuba and Iran. Nobody would suggest that the United States endorses the governments of those places. We recognise Afghanistan and Russia. Nobody would suggest that means recognition or support for the Taliban or for Putin. And indeed, we recognise Israel and have done since independence. And that does not mean that we support Israel's government or the actions of the IDF. Recognition, as the government has said, is based on the 1967 borders, and these can only be changed by negotiation and agreement, not by violence or annexation. I know that it is popular to refer to the term from the river to the sea. That may refer to different things to different people. To some people, it means the end of the Israeli state. That is not what we're saying here. We're saying a two-state solution, an Israeli state and a Palestinian state in the area between the river and the sea. Ireland now joins about 140 countries out of 200 countries in the world that now recognise the state of Palestine. We are not in the minority. We are in a very large majority of countries in the world that recognise the state of Palestine. Those that do not are almost all in the global north, in the West, if you prefer that term, and they are countries that often have their own history of colonialism and imperialism, and that is not a coincidence. I do think more countries will follow suit. I'm encouraged that President Macron in France has said that it's no longer taboo to recognise the Palestinian state before peace talks are concluded. I note that Penny Wong in Australia has not ruled it out, that Belgium, Malta and Slovenia have said they'll do so when the time is right. And I do hope that what's being done here by Spain, by Norway and by Ireland will help members of the public in other countries and politicians in other countries to put pressure on their governments for recognition and then for further action. In terms of next steps that we can take, and I do believe that we are correct to pursue things in a way that is multilateral, not unilateral, and seeks to bring people with us, not prove how righteous we are. And I think when it comes to talking to the United States, we should take up the call for the Leahy Act or the Leahy Act to be extended to Israel. This is legislation that exists in America that says that when America sells weapons to other countries, it can do so with conditions, conditions applied to the general forces or to specific forces, and that is legislation that I think long since overdue that it be applied to the IDF. And I think at EU level we can continue to press for a review, if not a suspension, of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. I think for too long, those of us in the Western world, or most of us in the Western world, have allowed ourselves to be convinced that Israel is a liberal Western democracy and belongs in our club. That clearly is not the case. This is a country that does not share our values anymore, if it ever did. We can see that from its actions in Gaza. It's profoundly illiberal and far from being a democracy in the European or American sense, is a country in which there are different sets of rights for different sorts of people. Jewish people with one set of rights, even if they only arrived yesterday. Israeli Arabs with a different set of rights, even though they may have been there for generations. And then, of course, those who live under occupation under military law for 70 years now in the West Bank and Gaza with a different set of rights. Again, a fourth set of rights if you include the Druze community. And there's no democracy in the world that operates on that basis. In terms of the change of policy by the government, previously we'd taken the view that recognition should only happen when a two-state solution is agreed. And that has changed, not because of the events of October 6th or 7th or 8th or 9th for that matter, but rather the rejection of a two-state solution by the Israeli government and the Israeli Prime Minister. The fact that no serious talks have taken place since 2014, and of course Israel's actions in Gaza. And while Israel, like all states, has the right to defend itself, it doesn't have the right to do wrong. And I believe we are witnessing a war of revenge, the collective punishment of the Palestinian people, and gross violations of international humanitarian law and basic principles of humanity. And Ceann Comhairle, I believe the war in Gaza is a disaster. Most of all, of course, for the Palestinian people who've been killed, injured, maimed, are bereaved or suffering. But it's also a disaster for Israel. It has gone on now for 6 months, and it is a total failure. Hamas has not been defeated. The hostages have not been released, and some are now dying in captivity. Israel is losing support around the world, in Europe, and indeed in the United States, where people of colour and those of the younger generation are increasingly turning against Israel. And it is radicalising people in the Middle East and other parts of the world, some of whom may become a security threat to Israel in the future. It is a total military and political failure, not just a humanitarian catastrophe. Finally, Ceann Comhairle, I just want to say a few words about anti-Semitism. Ireland is a safe country for Jewish people. We have a small Jewish community here for centuries, which has made a valuable contribution to the state in politics and law, in business, in medicine and other fields, and we're grateful for that. To my knowledge, no Jewish person in Ireland has ever been killed or even seriously injured as a consequence of their faith or identity. However, anti-Semitism does exist in Ireland, and we should be upfront about that. It exists in every country. And for the first time, I know that some Irish Jewish people feel a conflict between their Irish and Jewish identities, and that is very sad. And I have Jewish friends in New York, in London and other places who for the first time in their lives are uncomfortable about wearing the Star of David around their neck, are expressing their Jewish identity and feel threatened by some of the things that happen at pro-Palestine rallies. And I think we must say today that we also unequivocally reject anti-Semitism. Irish Jews and Jewish people in general are not responsible for the actions of the Israeli government or the IDF. Many are not even citizens of Israel. And we know during the Troubles, when the IRA committed terrible atrocities and targeted civilians, sometimes Irish people in the UK and other places were made to feel bad about that or made to feel responsible for that. And that was wrong. And we must make sure that we protect Jewish communities around the world and the Irish Jewish communities from that kind of politics or those kind of attitudes. And we shouldn't forget that Israel itself is a society in which many people are protesting for a ceasefire, and many support a two-state solution if they can be confident that a Palestinian state will not be used as a base to attack them. Hamas is a deeply anti-Semitic organisation, and we need to be clear in speaking to Palestinians that there can be no role for Hamas in the future government of Gaza or a Palestinian state, at least not with our support and assistance. Finally, just in relation to BDS, I think we need to be smart in the way that we approach this and proportionate. Yes, it's right to boycott and divest from settlement activity, but I don't think it would be right to do so from the Israeli state that we recognise. Similarly, I think when we engage in boycotts, we need to be careful not to boycott the wrong people. There is a strong strain of academics in Israel, human rights activists and civil society who oppose the human rights abuses that are occurring and have a different vision for their state. I think it's important that they're the ones who shouldn't be boycotted or ostracised, and we should do so on an appropriate basis. Thank you.